Hey guys, Luna here with a new video, and today we're taking a trip down memory lane. Memory lane for those of us who are young, so boomers, get out of this place. Today we are going to rank One Direction's discography, and yes, I do know that they have been apart for like 7 years now, I believe. But still, I wanted to do this video because maybe for those of you who are older don't know what I'm talking about, but One Direction was probably the first time that we got to experience, we the young people, 20 years old, 21 years old, got to experience the rush of a new artist, a new popular artist taking over the world. I mean, I remember One Direction being fucking everywhere as soon as they released their debut album. And I remember actually, every single girl in my classroom had a wristband that said I love 1D. I remember the t-shirts. My sister, someone that doesn't really enjoy music as much as I do, had every single album released by One Direction. There were a lot of artists who matched the popularity of One Direction, but really to me, I feel like back in the day, I'm talking about 2011, 2012, they were the most popular thing on the planet, and no one can say otherwise, really. I mean, it was all over the place. Every time they released something, it was just big news. It was everywhere, MTV, news. It was just amazing, and actually people were comparing them to Beatlemania. So imagine. So this video is to answer a question. Were the albums really good, or did they just work to, release a few singles that were really popular around the world? That's what we're going to be doing in this video. Every single one of the albums that they released, all 5 of them, I'm going to rank them from worst to best. And yeah, obviously this is only my personal opinion, so if you don't agree with my list, then leave a comment down below with your own list and I'll make sure to check it out. With that being said, let's go on with number 5. I am aware that Opal Knight is somewhat a black sheep in One Direction's discography, and I can tell why. It's obviously their weakest record, and even though it's not a bad album, it's not a great one either, actually. I think it's pretty average, it's only decent, and at times it can be obnoxious. For me, this was sort of the wrong introduction to the band because, first of all, even though some of the hooks in this album are really enjoyable, most of them are too loud, too messy. You cannot identify anyone's voice. I don't really like when all the music is all over the place. I really like to pay attention to every single instrument. And in this album, with all of this synth pop production, is kind of all over the place. And I hate it, actually. I don't really like how most of the hooks sound, even though I can tell that they are well written. They are good hooks. It's just that they are wrongly produced. The songwriting is corny. I believe that it's a bit forced to add every single member of the band in every single one of the songs. Putting 5 people into a single 3-minute song is really complicated. It makes it sound forced, and I believe that's a really good way to describe this album. Good songwriting, but forced. Of course, there are a few exceptions on this album. For example, One Thing, which is probably one of their best songs. What Makes You Beautiful, their biggest hit, the song that, traveled across the world and went #1 in every single place, I believe. That song was so big, I remember back in the day, but still, even today, if you listen to that song inside the album, it doesn't work as a proper introduction to what the album is going to be. Basically, this album has good intentions, but just doesn't capitalize on anything. I believe most of it is annoying, and yeah, it wasn't a really good introduction to the band back in the day. But it's still a decent album. I couldn't say it's a bad album, so yeah, number 5. I remember when this album was announced, I believe that the first single for this album was Best Song Ever. Maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. The song was great, I said, hey, this is kind of different. It showed that the band was trying to put new elements of rock music into their own sound, and I was really excited. But then I listened to the album, and there was just a few tracks here and there that offered a little bit of a change in the songwriting, but most of the album is just Opal Knight 3.0. And actually, if it weren't for the songs that I just mentioned, like Best Song Ever, You and I, these songs that actually tried to do something different, this album would have been even worse than Opal Knight. Not to be a hater or anything, but staying with the same concept and the same type of songwriting by the 3rd album, it was already getting old, and I remember this album was released at the peak of their popularity. I remember some comments saying that this album was sort of a letdown, and I can't agree more, especially after Take Me Home was such a great improvement from Opal Knight. I think one of the reasons why this album didn't really work, it was because even though they did well by trying to add new elements into the song, they didn't commit. The album does not commit to any particular genre. More like, I'm gonna try these different sounds to see which one works the most. So even though this album was a turning point for the band and, it paved the way for the second half of the band's career, which I think it's the best by far, I just don't like this album as much as I like the album above it. So yeah, number 4, Midnight Memories. Good album, but Listen, Take Me Home may not be their most popular album. I do know that, and I know that this album, some people think is their worst. But I believe this album was a great improvement from Opal Knight, and I think it's the first time that I can say that this is not just another version of Opal Knight. It definitely looks like it, if you look at the cover and if you look at the first song of the album, Live While We're Young, but even that song already tries to give every single one of the band members more space. You can tell that they're putting more care into the songwriting, not necessarily talking about a woman. The songwriting isn't as corny as it is in Midnight Memories and Opal Knight. Even the boys sound better, every single one of them are really good vocalists, but the problems I have with the vocals in other albums are basically the production, not the actual vocals, the performance from each and every single one of the boys. But even when I do love this album and I think it's a massive improvement, especially when things get slower in tracks like Little Things, I think that it still sounds a bit forced. The main problem with One Direction is basically that there's 5 of them and all of the tracks are about 3 minutes long. And in each and every single one of the songs, each and every single one of the members sing. The problem with this is that it sounds forced. It sounds like they just wrote a song and then they split it up like, okay, you're going to sing this, you're going to sing this, you're going to sing that, and then in the hook, well, we all sing. That is not a way to write music. You have to find the best option for each part of the song. And if you don't fit into the style of the song, you just don't sing in that song. Every single one of the members have to sing no matter the length or the structure of the song. I don't know if this was a legal thing or what, but it just doesn't sound good. Of course, this isn't a big problem overall, but it is a detail that stopped this album from being way better. So yeah, this album is good. It was an improvement from Up All Night, but it's still far from number 2 and number 1. So yeah, let's go on with those. For many people, their best album, and actually I think that I kind of agree with them. The only reason why this is at number 2 is because in number 1 they solved a problem that this album still has. But basically this was the point where the boys were given more creative freedom, and this is key because the songs are structured differently. And it's just evident from the first song on the album, Still My Girl. Wonderful song. And already on this album, they began to solve a problem that was present in every single album before this one. I feel like in this album, they took their time to pick which one of them would sing what part of the song. And I think that makes just a massive improvement. Most of the songs here are really good. The problem is that at some point, it still sounds forced. Some of the songs in here are just too noisy for the type of song it is. I know that doesn't make sense, but basically a ballad is supposed to be slow, beautiful, calming, because everyone starts to sing at the same time. It sounds noisy, messy, it sounds like everything but a ballad. It sounds everything but romantic. That's just the feeling I get. So yes, I do think this album was a massive improvement from Up All Night, Take Me Home, and Midnight Memories, but it still has a few things that were solved in the next album. So yes, great album, really good songwriting and really good performance by every single one of them. And it just makes you wonder what would have happened if Zayn never left, But anyway, great album. I think that if you're into the original lineup that One Direction had, all 5 of them, this may be the best album that they released. But for me, there was one more. Let's go. Made in the AM is definitely the best album that One Direction has released. I'm not willing to have this conversation with you. But even though this is not debatable for me, I am willing to give you a small explanation on why I think this is their greatest album. Number 1, the rock elements that they try to implement in Midnight Memories, here they are perfected. Drag Me Down is one of their best songs. I never thought that One Direction would be releasing a song like that. And even though it's not one of my favorites, it was a great introduction to what the album had to offer. Number 2, this album spoke to an older audience. One Direction already knew that the kids that listened to Opal Knight were now teenagers. Number 3, not only did you find the best vocal performances by Harry Styles on this album, but also the best contributions to songwriting. I just hear how comfortable he sounded performing these songs on this album. I love this album, and 70% of the reason why I love this album is Harry Styles. Number 4, there are only 4 of them, and yes, I do believe that Zayn was a really good member, and actually next to Harry, the most talented one. But who gives a fuck? The fact that there are only 4 of them now helped solve the problem that I mentioned before. They have more space in songs. You can tell that they have more freedom to perform because now there's only 4 of them, and there's more space for them to fit in their verses. So I just think that makes a great contribution to this album. Overall, this album is just filled with good songwriting, good performances, and I believe that in terms of instrumentals, this is the most diverse One Direction album you'll find. Because of that, and because I think it was a great way to end the story, I'll put this album in number 1. And if you want some of the best songs on this album, you can go for Drag Me Down, Perfect, History. I mean, there's so many good songs here, and even though it's not one of the greatest albums of the last decades, and I actually don't think it's the greatest album of 2015 either, I still think it's a really good album, and I think it's the living proof that One Direction wasn't only a really popular band, but also really, really talented. And maybe we'll see them together again. Who knows? We can only dream about it. If they do, I hope they stick to the theme of this album because it's definitely their best. I love it. That will be it for today's video, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, why not leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this. Please leave a comment down below and tell me, what do you think? Which is the best One Direction album and why? This was really fun. I mean, even though I don't think that One Direction is one of the greatest bands of the last decade or anything like that, I still think that you can enjoy every single one of their albums, and you can actually acknowledge that they were a really good band, that they were really talented, and most of the songs are really enjoyable. And you know what? I have a lot of fun every time I put on a One Direction album. So if you haven't heard any of these albums, you've only heard a couple of 1D songs, I definitely recommend for you to jump in their discography, because definitely it's good, and you'll be surprised to see how many good songs they released apart from the singles. That is it for today, and I'll be seeing you guys soon. Bye.